My name was Eliab. I was a merchant in Ekron, a Philistine by blood, and a witness to something I still struggle to describe. It began when the wind changed. The sky above Damascus darkened. Not like a storm, worse. The clouds twisted like they were alive, angry. Word came quickly. Damascus had fallen under something no army could match. Tyre, that proud city of stone rising from the sea, closed its gates, but it didn't matter. I heard from sailors that its wealth, silver like sand, gold like dirt, had vanished in smoke. They said the sea itself turned on her. In Ashkelon, mothers gripped their children without knowing why. In Gaza, the market went silent. Ekron, my city, shook, not from earthquake, but from a dread that settled in our bones. We had lived by our gods, by our walls, by our trade and our pride. And yet we all knew something greater was moving. They called it judgment. I didn't know what that meant, not yet. Then came the rumors from Jerusalem that their God, the one God, not many, was stirring, that he would protect his house, that no enemy would pass through again. We laughed at first, but that laugh turned to silence when people began to speak of the prophet. They said he stood alone on a hillside outside the city, shouting to the wind. "Rejoice, daughter of Zion! Shout, daughter of Jerusalem! Your king is coming to you!" But he wasn't on a chariot. He didn't have a sword. They said he came riding a donkey, a young one, like a servant, like a farmer. And yet, they said, peace followed him like a shadow. No one had seen anything like it. Wherever he passed, the soldiers put down their weapons. The war horses bolted, bows cracked in two, and people changed. They knelt. Not because they were forced, but because they saw something that broke their anger. He didn't shout to rule. He whispered peace, and the world seemed to listen. Even far from Jerusalem, we felt it. The dungeons opened. Prisoners came out, eyes wide, mouths open to the light. Some of them had been forgotten, left to rot. But they walked out like they'd just been born. They said it was because of a promise, a blood-bound covenant. I didn't understand that, but I saw its power. Chains dropped like dust. Walls cracked without a single hand laid on them. The world didn't end. It changed. And in the silence that followed, I wondered, had we misunderstood power all along? The king did not conquer cities. He conquered hearts. And we, those who feared him most, were the ones who needed him most. I was there when the judgment began, but more importantly, I lived to see the king come. It wasn't long after that the skies changed again, not with wrath this time, with need. The rains had stopped. The earth cracked open. Crops failed. We watched animals grow thin and children thinner. People lifted their eyes to heaven, but heaven was silent. Then, suddenly, clouds gathered again, but not like before. This wasn't fire. This was mercy. Thunder rolled gently across the hills, and rain began to fall, not violently, but like a gift. We rejoiced. Farmers knelt in muddy fields, weeping. And yet, in the temples of the coast, people still turned to their idols. I watched as they laid offerings before lifeless stone. There was no voice, no answer, just silence. Some tried to tell us they had dreams, visions, prophecies, but they were hollow. It was all empty comfort. People wandered through the streets, eyes vacant. They were like sheep. No guide, no direction, no one to care for them. Then we heard the voice again. This time it came like a storm through the mountains. Not destructive, but commanding. He was angry, not with the sheep, but with the ones who failed them, the false shepherds. "I will deal with them," the voice said, "but I will gather my own. I will raise them up. From among them will come leaders who will not break, who will not flee. A cornerstone, a tent peg, a battle bow. They will stand together. And we saw it happening, not in palaces, but in villages, not among generals, but among the ordinary. Tents were raised, communities rebuilt, leaders emerged, quiet and strong. And in distant lands, Egypt, Assyria, people stirred. Families who had been scattered generations ago began to return. They said they heard a whistle in their dreams, a call home, and somehow, across deserts and rivers and borders, they came. I saw caravans stretching from the horizon, children riding on carts, old men walking with staffs. They were singing songs none of us remembered, but they remembered. And when they arrived, they looked around, amazed, as if to say, we never thought we'd see this place again. But they did, because he brought them home. They were scattered, and now they were gathered. And they were not the same as when they left. They had seen far lands, they had survived exile, they had endured silence. But now they lived again, and they knew who they belonged to. I, Eliab of Ekron, watched it all, and for the first time I wondered if maybe I too had been a sheep without a shepherd. He held 2 staffs in his hands, one carved smooth and beautiful, the other rough and knotted like a broken limb. He called them Beauty and Bonds, and he walked among the people as a shepherd, feeding them, guiding them, but they rejected him. Some turned away, others mocked. They did not want to be led by gentleness. They wanted power, control. A shepherd without a sword was not a shepherd they could trust. I watched as the prophet broke the staff called Beauty. The sound of the wood cracking echoed through the hills. "This was the covenant," he said, his voice shaking. The winds shifted again, not as a storm, but like the slow turning of a page. One morning, the forest near Lebanon groaned, not from wind, but from collapse. We heard the cedars fall, great trees, ancient as kings, crashing to the ground like judgment-made wood. I'd heard stories from traders in the north, of smoke rising from the forests, of fire that devoured what once gave life. It was as though even the land had been condemned. In the pasture lands, I saw him, the prophet again, but this time not as a herald of peace. And then they paid him, not with honor, but with insult, 30 pieces of silver, the price of a slave. He looked at the coins in his hand like they were poison. Then he hurled them toward the temple, as though the weight of them might shatter stone. The second staff, bonds, he broke next. And the air itself seemed to split. Where there had been unity, now came division. Brothers turned against brothers. Judah and Israel, once kin, became strangers. Then I heard words I cannot forget. Woe to the worthless shepherd who deserts the flock. May his arm wither. May his eye go blind. It chilled me, not just because of the curse, but because I saw people who matched it, leaders who led for gain, guardians who abandoned their own. And somewhere deep inside, I feared I had once been one of them, not a shepherd, but a follower of worthless ones. And now, we were scattered. The king had come, but the people turned their backs, and the shepherd was rejected. Before the final cry for peace came the rising shadow of war. Jerusalem sat on the hill, still and quiet, but all around her, armies gathered. They came like clouds at sunrise, soft at first, but heavy with dread. Word spread through the cities. Something was about to break. And the prophet spoke again. Jerusalem will be a cup of trembling to the nations. They will try to lift her like a stone, and they will be broken. I did not understand how a city could break the hands of nations, but then I saw it. As soldiers marched on her walls, they stumbled. As they laid siege, their hands failed. Their strength turned to confusion. Their unity turned to chaos. Inside the city, something stirred. The weak became like warriors. The lame walked with fire in their steps. The house of David rose like a flame, and then came the moment no one could explain. The battle quieted. The skies opened, and a vision came. A figure, pierced, wounded, standing above them all, not judging, but mourning. The people looked up and wept. I saw grown men fall to their knees. I heard the cries of mothers as they held their children close. The sound was not one of fear, but of recognition. They had pierced him, and only now did they see who he was. They wept as if for an only son. They mourned as if the light of the world had gone out before their eyes. Every family, every house, alone in their sorrow, yet united in their grief. Not for what had been done to them, but for what they had done. I had never heard such silence in a city before, and in that silence I finally understood what the prophet had meant. The king had come, and they had pierced him. But even then, he did not turn away. Instead, he opened their eyes. The silence after the morning did not last. It broke like a spring bursting from stone. One morning, in the very heart of Jerusalem, a fountain opened, not dug by hands, not summoned by rain. It came suddenly, pure, endless, and people came to it, not with buckets, but with brokenness. I saw them, men and women, old and young, step into the light of that water like it was washing not just their skin, but something deeper. It wasn't just a spring. It was something holy. They whispered of sin, of shame, of guilt they could no longer carry. And as they touched the water, I watched their eyes change. The burden lifted. Some fell to their knees, others stood in silence, but none walked away unchanged. That was the day idols began to fall. Not by force, not by decree, but by rejection. Stone gods were left behind. False prophets disappeared. The old lies no longer comforted. In one village, I saw a father confront his son. The boy had pretended to speak for God. But when the truth was revealed, the father said, "You will not speak lies in the Lord's name." There was no hatred, only clarity, like the fog had lifted. Even the false prophets cast off their robes. They claimed to be farmers again, not visionaries. They tried to hide the marks on their hands, the signs of their deception, but no one needed their false words anymore, because the voice of the shepherd had been heard. Then came the moment I feared would break me. The prophet stood again. His voice, now soft, said words that froze the blood in my veins. "Awake, O sword, against my shepherd, against the one who is my companion." And I knew he was speaking of the king, the one we had pierced. The sword would strike him, and when it did, the sheep would scatter, and we did. The city broke apart. People fled, families fractured. It felt like the light had left us again. But not all was lost. A remnant remained. Not many, but enough. And they were not destroyed. They were refined. I watched them walk through the fire. Not literal flames, but trials, burning, testing. What came out was not ash. It was gold. They cried out, "The Lord is our God." And he answered, "You are my people." I, Eliab of Ekron, who had once worshipped idols and followed false shepherds, stood in the glow of that promise. And I knew cleansing had come, not with flood or flame, but with a fountain and a name, and a voice that had never stopped calling us home. It happened at night. Jerusalem slept, but beyond her walls, firelight flickered, not from hearths, but from camps, countless ones. The nations had gathered. They came with armor and arrogance, torches and siege engines, banners raised high. From every direction, they surrounded the city, and when morning came, they struck. Houses were torn open, streets flooded with panic. Half the city was captured, families were ripped apart, and still, they kept coming. I stood outside the city, hidden in the hills, watching, praying, and then I saw him. Not the prophet, not a man, but the Lord. He descended to the Mount of Olives, not like a whisper this time, like a storm that splits the sky. When his feet touched the mountain, the earth groaned and gave way. The mount cracked in two, opening a valley where none had been, a path to escape, a way through judgment. People poured into it, refugees running not from wrath, but toward mercy, and light came. But not like the sun, not morning or evening, something else. A day only he knew, a twilight that held no fear. From the heart of Jerusalem, water burst forth. It flowed in two directions, east and west, always flowing, never stopping, winter and summer alike. And then it was declared, "The Lord will be king over the whole earth. His name will be one. I felt it in my bones, in the air, in the trembling of the ground." He was not a god among gods. He was the only. The land shifted to make room for him. The valleys rose, the hills fell. Jerusalem stood high, unshaken. And from every nation, those who survived, those who had once come to destroy, now came with offerings, not of conquest, of worship. Year by year they returned, not just to see a city, but to see a king. Even the simplest things changed. The bells on horses read, "Holy to the Lord." The pots in the kitchens were like the bowls before the altar. Everything, ordinary or sacred, belonged to him now. And no corruption remained, no hidden rebellion, no secret idol. The doors of the temple stood open, and the nations, once at war, stepped inside together. I, Eliab of Ekron, once a stranger and an enemy, now walked among them, not as a captive, but as a son, because the day of the Lord had come, and the world had become his. Thank you for joining us on this journey through part 2 of the book of Zechariah. We want to spread the word of God for all those who enjoy it. If you got something valuable out of the video, let us know in the comments. We're grateful for your support. God bless you. Amen.